To guide you through a tasting which is going to last about 45 minutes, maybe an hour, somewhere in that vicinity, depending how nice they are to us out there in terms of noise. The purpose and the aim and my objective is to teach you about shape and size of a glass. You're all very well versed in going to wine tastings, pairings with food and wine and all these things. The wine glass is the part of the equation which is without a doubt the most variable, which means that you're subjected by whatever it is you pick up and use the glass to consume with. What we discovered is that shape and size is paramount to enjoyment. And this is exactly the experience I'm going to take you through here. So just a few little introductions. My name is Baulderstone. I'm the Managing Director for Riedel in Australia and New Zealand. I've been with the company for 21 years, various roles, various capacities throughout the group, travelling all through Asia Pacific and the Middle East. Believe it or not, we do sell glasses in the Middle East. We also sell a lot of bowls and plates and vases, which is the other side of our business. We are one of the world's largest manufacturers of glass. I'm not going to take you through and talk to you about the other parts of the business because I don't believe it has a lot of resonance or not a lot of purpose for what we're doing here today. And in fact, I'm not going to talk about the history of the business so much. The reason being is that we go back 260 years. I could spend hours standing here talking to you about the lovely history we have in decoration, building ornaments, fundamental feature pieces like you see above you here, similar to this, not exactly. But all of this, lovely stories, but has no real purpose for you. The Riedel company is known today for producing varietal-specific wine glasses. What exactly does this mean, varietal-specific wine glasses? It's a very simple thing. You buy wine based around variety. You choose wines based on the like that you have in certain varietals, whether it be Shiraz, Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, etc. The list goes on. Each grape varietal has its own unique DNA. Klaus Riedel was the first person in documented history that discovered the correlation between grape and shape of glass. Look back a little bit into the history and you just see that, and you will discover that glasses were produced around ornament. The more decorative, the heavier. Think about, probably as a reference point, your grandparents' crystal. This was very much a prestigious item to own in the home. You would use it on special occasions. They were heavy, they were thick, they were decorative. Sometimes they had colour. The more colour, and the thicker, the heavier, the higher the perceived value. In other words, it was all about the glass. Nothing to do with the liquid inside of it. Now, here comes the polarising part. If we look at glass prices over the course of the last 30 to 40 years, cost of production has come down and down and down, therefore, cost to consumer has come down. Wine, of course, has gone completely the opposite direction. Why? It's because wine is a finite commodity, glass is not. Wine is a product which comes in nuances, comes with from one vineyard, as you all know, to the next vineyard, just a subtle change in one row to the next row, a subtle change in climatic conditions between one vintage to the next, and you can demand significantly more for your wine. The reality is, wine is a very emotive product. People buy wine every day based around emotion. We know that people buy glassware based around emotion, but it's not the same thing. Wine is something that people consume on a day-to-day basis to lift the spirits. Think about it. Lift the spirits. And for this purpose alone, wine is, without a doubt, the product which people hold in very high esteem, certainly in comparison to the glass. The glass is just the vessel to put it to your lips. Without the glass, the only other way to drink it is direct from the bottle. Pure and simple. Emergency situation, nothing wrong with this, but the reality is, you will discover that you're subjected by shape and size of glass. We as a company have put a lot of energy and effort into this concept over the last 60 years. Tasting, research, it's hard work, without a doubt. And yes, you discover that the glasses are fundamentally different. We talk a lot throughout our tasting about aroma, aromatics. Aroma is 70 to 80% of the experience of a wine. 70 to 80% of the information of wine is delivered aromatically. The average consumer puts their nose in, has a little smell, puts it straight in their mouth to check whether they like it or not. You would know, just by putting your nose in the glass, whether it's worth to put it to your lips. 70 to 80% of the information, 70 to 80% of the fun, and just by the way, I mention this word fun now for a very good reason. is because as much as we want to complicate your wine life with this whole concept, your wine life is complicated enough, no doubt. The reality is, a glass of wine is all about fun. It's about enjoyment. And correlation between shape and size of glass, therefore the nuances and the characteristics and enjoyment are intrinsically linked. The palate, I have to say to you, is the one part that the science world has failed us on. The science world can't tell us exactly what happens on the tongue. We know we have 4 basic taste receptors: sweet, acid, salt, bitter. The science world at one point in time had this lovely analogy which worked beautifully for us, because they said that sweetness was on the tip, acid on the top and the bottom, salt down the side, and bitterness on the back of your mouth and on your cheeks and on your gums. This worked absolutely beautifully for us because we know that each glass has different flow patterns into the mouth, and we'll show you this in a minute. But the science world has since come out and debunked this theory and said, no, we can't pinpoint it for each individual. There are 2 further taste receptors which they've discovered: umami and fat. Fat is actually a taste receptor on the palate. Deakin University discovered it about 3 years ago. Some people have a high threshold to it, like all of the other sensitivity levels, and some people have a very low threshold, which gives you a very good indication as to the styles of foods that you are easily enjoying or not at all. Hot fatty chips, for example, people love them, or most of us love them, but some of us love them more than others, and it's all got to do with the taste receptors. Sends little messages up to the brain. So, thinking about this, we were able to construct a little tasting to start this experience, and this is why your glasses start clean, is because we start with water. We're going to use water to see and check the flow patterns from each one of the glasses to see what happens on your tongue. The first thing I'm going to get you to do, and this is a little test, this is the only test you get today, is actually opening this bottle. Antipodes have one producer of this cap in New Zealand, and it's a bit of a challenge to get off. If you have any moisture on your hands, I guarantee that you will probably struggle. In which case, grab a cloth. Here you go.
Thank you.
And now, yeah, you know what? If anyone's really stuck, you got it? We've complained to them about this and they say they can't fix it. So it is what it is. All right, before you do anything here, first things first, what I'm going to get you to do is just have a sip of water direct from the bottle, which, by the way, is the way most people consume water unless you're sitting at a dining table. Very dry on the palate. It's got a slight coarse and graininess. Think about aftertaste of water. No one's ever asked you this before. Think about the aftertaste of water, and it's just bone dry on the tongue. You'll have this sensation of this grainy coarseness and roughness. The one thing Antipodes pride themselves on is the neutrality of their water. In other words, they say it's perfect for dining because it's got a very neutral, sweet palate to it. Something you didn't see right now. Please put about 100 mils in each one of your glasses. All right. Folks, what I want you to do is pick up the glass that sits in position 4. It's obviously no secret as to which glass is which. It's named underneath them. This is a Pinot Noir glass. What I'm going to get you to do, I want you to have a look at the flow pattern here. The only purpose of what we're doing with this side of the tasting is just to look at what happens on the tongue. Be brave and pour it right up to the rim without pouring it out. Probably best to do it over the mat, not over a leg. And you'll notice it comes from a very broad base and it comes up to a very fine tip. Look at this little lip which exists here and feel what happens when the glass touches the lip and you start to pour water into the mouth. Have a sip. Feel the cool sensation on the palate and what happens. We use the cold in the water a bit like litmus paper on your tongue. It comes onto the tip of your tongue just comes up to meet the glass. It runs down the sides to the back and then back around the front. Feel the cool sensation, it's all in the mouth. But most importantly, feel the sweetness and the softness of the water. Very tactile and very soft on the palate. in comparison to the bottle, you would assume, if you didn't pour it yourself, that this was two different products. Glass 5 is a fascinating little test. Have a look at the flow pattern here, because due to, of course, the narrower glass, it's much narrower in the middle, and it still comes to quite a fine point. Feel what happens on your palate here. Feel where the cool sensation touches you. Right up the back. First touch point. Down the throat. Misses the front part of the palate. It's still got a softness and a sweetness, but not as much as it did in the Pinot Noir glass. So now you're starting to see differential. Now you're starting to see distinction between bottle and two different glasses. The cool sensation here is completely the opposite, because it's all at the back and all towards the throat. If you know a little bit about Shiraz, tells you underneath what this is for. If you know a little bit about Shiraz, this will unlock a little bit of the information and secrets as to how this glass was designed and developed. Glass 6, globally for us, is the most sold glass. We sell more glasses of number 6 than we do of any other glass. Why? We believe because it's the biggest. This is the emotional part of why people choose glasses. They choose glasses based on size, capacity. How much can I put in it? If you're drinking a glass of wine at home, you will get close to a full bottle of wine in here, filled to the top. Of course, we wouldn't pour this, but if you were gluttonous and crazy enough, you could. Let's have a look at the flow pattern here. Pour the wine, or pour the water right up to the rim. You notice a very distinct difference here because it's very broad on the rim. Broad in the base and broad on the rim. Have a taste. Feel the sweetness, the softness, mouth-filling. This combines the harmony of the two glasses. You've got the mouth, but you've got the back as well. Front, sides, it's got almost every little touch point to it, and it becomes the softest, the sweetest of the water. Go back and have a second sip. And you're going to discover that something that you'll learn more about when we get onto the wine side of things is that when you build on something which is positive, it actually gets better each time. All of you sit in the capacity where you're responsible for wine service or food service. A plate of food that is good doesn't dissipate by the time you get to the last mouthful. In fact, you go looking for another mouthful, and another mouthful, and another mouthful. It's exactly the same when we're dealing with wine, and even with something as simple as water. The pure nature of consumption is driven by the fact that something is balanced on the palate. Whether a consumer knows what that means or doesn't know, we all know that if it's not your day-to-day business and your job, like it is for us, then this is not the way you normally think. You get engaged in conversation with people and it becomes just part of the experience itself. Why is it that you're sitting with a group of, if you're one of these people that has to pay for groups of tables, taking out your staff members or taking out friends, and you get the water bill at the end of the night? The water bill can be as much sometimes as the food bill, depending on how much consumption was. There's other nights where there's almost no water consumed. Look at the wine bill that night and boom, wine is through the roof. The reason being is consumption. Very simple. I often talk about, especially with restaurateurs, if you think about everyone who walks in your door, you're capable of selling them one entree, one main and one dessert at best. Or if you have a degustation menu, maybe one set, whatever it may be. But I'm not going to order 2 mains, 2 entrees and 2 desserts because I simply can't fit it in. Can I consume more if something tastes good, wine-wise? Oh yeah, of course. We all have those extra little bellies which we can find when it comes to wine or spirits, etc. But if it's not balanced, it's not going to happen, pure and simple. So this sets the scene for the wine tasting. Now, you have a glass here which you can pour this into. What I would suggest is just pour from your... let's empty out the water and let's get it ready for the wine. Okay. So as I made you just taste through water, I bet no one's ever made you do this before. Now I'm going to make you smell through. So first thing I'm going to get you to do is pick up your Pinot Noir. It sits on the left-hand side and in the cup number 1, and just split it between your 3 glasses. Just evenly distribute it. It doesn't need to be perfect. I'm not going to talk a great deal about the wines. I'll give you a quick introduction of each wine when we get to it, just so you know region and style. We'll talk more about what we see in the wine together. So this is Dalrymple Cottage Block Pinot Noir, Tasmanian Pinot Noir 2014. Yes, 2014. So young, relatively young Pinot Noir from emerging, well, hard to call it an emerging region these days. Certainly I would say a region which has proven itself time and time again. What I want you to do is pick up glass 4, give it a really good swirl. Now, if you're not, everyone's probably in different phases. No, everyone's pretty good. All right, I won't go into it. Swirling wine, actually, just if you're not sure how to do it, just put it on the table, make a little swirling motion. That way it stops you from decorating your friends around you. Second little instruction I have for you, and this is the one that I can't emphasize to you enough. Smelling wine. I see so often people do this. They get their nose close, but they're scared to go in. You know why? Because they're used to those tiny little glasses where they're filled to the top. And if you put your nose in, you dip your nose in wine. So you typically don't do that. You just put your nose here. Problem with that is that fun factor I was talking about. What you pay for, the aroma, sits inside, in here. It stops at its most intense right at the top of the glass. If you don't put your nose in, you're relying on drawing the aroma out. In a room like this where they're cooking inside here, you'll get a lot of aromatics of smoke, all sorts of characteristics, and just a touch of the wine. What you paid for is what you want to smell. So dive into the glass, head in, dip. Beautiful aromas of fruit on the nose. So typical fruit forward characteristics here. Cherries, raspberry character. It's got that lovely herbal, earthy, minty note into it, so that slight greenness. But at this stage, it's really all about the primary fruit. Big, rich, leaps out of the glass. Pick up glass 5. Give it a good swirl and smell. All right, look at the characteristics here. There's a fundamental shift because now it's a lot about the green notes, a lot about the herbal components, and fruit just takes a bit of a back seat here. In other words, harder to define the fruit component on the nose. It's all about herbal notes. Pick up everybody's favourite glass, number 6, and smell. Fascinating here because now you get a lifted aromatic of alcohol. You get much more on the oak notes. The heavier parts of the wine start to exhibit from this glass. But most importantly, go looking for the fruit. Go specifically looking for those characteristics, that vibrancy and that freshness of the fruit, which you would expect at this young age, and it's like a hollow into the wine. Come back to glass 4. Have a smell. Everything back in order. Have a little sip. Folks, if you want to spit, you're most welcome to. The little buckets for you. If not, a little sip is also fine. Think about touch points. Think about the feel on the palate. Sweetness up the front. Then the acid cuts through. Gives you this nice crisp acidity onto the wine. Nice length on the wine. And beautiful finish. Front, middle and the back part of the wine have structure. So the story, the message of the wine has this beautiful character on the palate. Think about the aftertaste, the length, and it gives you this beautiful long wine on the palate. Pick up glass 5. Have a smell, refresh your memory and have a taste. Feel the tactile sensation. The aroma that you smelt, those greener notes, the earth components are much more prominent on the palate, to the point where the tannins grip they become a lot more sour and tart, so the astringency of the acidity. Then you get that sourness coming from the tannic structure, and you get the bitter components of the tannins. Think about aftertaste. Think about that last little bit on your palate, and it's bone dry. It's short, and the wine pulls up short, and that becomes the last experience of the wine. The fruit here is like a hollow. Complete polar opposite. Exactly like you experience with water, just on a much more exaggerated scale. Pick up glass 6, Cabernet glass. Have a taste. Bit of cloying sweetness on the palate. It's missing that middle part of the wine, interestingly. It's actually missing that whole acidic structure of the wine, but you still get the tannic balance at the end. And the one thing that I can feel on my palate now, you'll feel this heat that's exhibiting out of the wine. Obviously the wine, there's no change in alcohol between the glasses. Of course, this is impossible. But it's all about balance. The easiest way to explain this is if you think about the basic structure of a white wine or the basic structure of a red wine. This is what determines balance and enjoyment for you. Again, this is intrinsically linked, and there's an order preference for this, or I would say there's an order hierarchy. Fruit, so something sweet, balanced by something acidic, and alcohol. These are the three basic formulas, or three basic components to the formula of white wine. Red wine has, of course, a fourth component, but the order is no different. Fruit balanced by acidity with alcohol and with tannin. Now, if you vary this perception, if you vary the way in which the wine is perceived on your palate, think about glass 6. Fruit becomes like a hollow, so we've lost fruit. You get a bit of cloying sweetness but undefined. In fact, we don't even have acidity, so we're relying on these two parts, which is what we saw. You saw more oak and more greener components, and you saw more alcohol. Why? Because they are the prominent parts based on the shape and the size of this glass. It's all about perception. The glass is, as I mentioned at the start, responsible for the way in which you consume wine. It can take a perfect wine and pull it apart. Or it can take a perfect wine and present it to you in the right order, with the right structure. And that's exactly what the glass's role is to do. Dealing with food and wine matching is quite a challenging task for us, because very hard for us to travel all around the world and do tastings when we don't know how food is being prepared. So we love the concept. We talk a lot about food and wine tasting, but the easiest way for us to manage this is with a piece of chocolate. So first piece of chocolate I'm going to get you to try is the Lindt White Madagascan Vanilla. Don't put the whole thing in your mouth, please. Bite off the ear. And what I'm going to get you to do, melt it up. It's a little bit cool still, so normally it melts very easily. You want a big gooey chocolatey mess in your mouth. Lovely creamy textural vanilla. Pick up your Pinot Noir glass and have a sip. It lifts immediately the chocolate. You go from vanilla to caramel. You get all of the components of the wine intact. In other words, you get each part of the fruit components, the acidic components, the earth, and the harmony, and it makes you want to have another bite and another sip. That, folks, is food and wine matching at its best. White chocolate, red wine. Beautiful. We talk a lot about right elements, wrong mix. In other words, you could, as a restaurant, you can put an enormous amount of energy and effort into buying great produce, storing your wines correctly, making them sure they're served at the right temperature, taking a lot of energy and effort on your food. Stick any old glass or put all your Pinot Noir into glass 6 and watch what happens. Have another little bite. Pick up glass 6 and have a sip. The first thing you'll notice you do is you get it out of your mouth as fast as possible. In other words, you don't want it to stay there. Why? It's because the two are reacting with each other. It's like oil and water, they separate on the palate. After it's gone, it's just flat and dead. There's no length left on the experience. In fact, the last thing it makes you want to do is have another bite and another sip. Now, if you're in this situation, you know what consumers do? They separate the two. No longer do they become combined, which means, trust me, consumption goes down. They'll eat their food and they'll drink their wine. They'll do them as two separate components. It's like eating, it's like the day you've had a dreadful day at work, you come home with a big bottle of Shiraz to discover you're having fish and salad for dinner. You have a bite, you have a sip, and you go, oh, forget it. You eat your food, and then you drink your wine. The two are not going hand in hand. But when the two match and marry, you go have another bite, you have another sip. This is the basic nature of consumption. We can't help ourselves because it's joyful, it's fun. This is exactly what this experience here is about. All right, that's the first little introduction on wine. What I'm going to get you to do is to pour the wine back into your plastic cup and just get ready for the next wine. Now, don't move a muscle just yet because I'm going to get you to, believe it or not, drink wine from a plastic cup. And there's a good reason for this. Shiraz from a plastic cup can outperform a Riedel glass. So hear me loud and clear here. I'm not standing here telling you once you have a Riedel glass all your problems are solved. Absolutely not. It's about shape and it's about size and it's about variety. The next little experience is what I like to call, we call it sort of aircraft wine, plane wine. Those days when you get on the plane and you have unfortunately you're not turning left, you're turning right, and you head down the back. 4 p.m. on a daily service, you get wine these days, all right? Very interestingly, you come back on a Perth service, people they've abandoned the plastic cup, they just go straight from the bottle. Why not? Pick up the plastic cup which sits right in the middle here. Now you have a little treat, by the way, because the second wine is a wine which I've been storing for about the last 4 to 5 years. This is a 2010 vintage. I was hoping that the 2014 vintage was going to come in to serve to you, but it's the 2010. So it's been perfectly stored and yeah, you got a little treat today that I wasn't aware of. So you're welcome. All right, folks, pick it up, have a smell. And now you discover what plain wine is. No aroma. Someone just dipped their nose in. That's why you don't put your nose right in the glass when it's filled to the top. There you go. But it's inoffensive. Have a taste. Nothing wrong with it. You know why you have that glass of wine when you get on that 4 p.m. service? I talked about this at the very start of the tasting. Lift the spirits. That's all it is. You wouldn't drink it because it's amazing wine, ever. Of course not. But you do it because it just elevates your mood. Pure and simple. Nothing wrong with it. But if I asked you to part with $50 for the bottle, you would say, no, thank you. I'll have water, tea. You wouldn't drink that coffee because you can't. But here's going to be a very interesting little test. I want you to pour all of it into glass 6. Now, I mentioned earlier, glass 6 is our most sold glass. When it comes to Shiraz and Cabernet, these are the two varietals which in Australia we love to blend, that classic Australian, Great Australian Red. Also from a service point of view, we know, yes, we get it, you have to double up your glasses. We understand this. But if you sell Cabernet and you sell Shiraz, then yes, you have to double up your glasses. It's a fact of life. And this is exactly why. The only thing I'm going to say to here is don't be fooled in thinking more is better. Analyse what the more is. Pick up glass 6. Give it a good swirl. And smell. Hot on the nose, appearance of high alcohol, first perception. Go back and have another smell. For a wine that has 7 years worth of age, it's got an enormous amount of greenness to it. A lot of stemmy characters, a lot of herbal notes on the nose, a distinct lack of fruit right now. Have a taste. Sour, tart, very bitter at the back, bone dry. And now, here comes a very interesting little test. Have a second sip right now. Do you notice how it gets hotter? It becomes more bitter, more sour, more intense. And if I was mean enough to say have a third sip, guess what? It gets worse again. I talked at the start of the tasting, even when we were doing the water, positive builds on positive and negative builds on negative. You can't hide from this. The glass only presents the way the wine is meant to be. If you gave me a choice, firstly, I wouldn't buy either of those wines. But if you gave me a choice, where would I prefer to consume it? I would take it in a plastic cup any day over the Cabernet glass. You want to stop selling Shiraz? Stick it in a Cabernet glass every time. Pure and simple. And this is what you're going to get. Now let me show you what this wine really has to offer you. Just split it. Leave some in glass 6 and put some in glass 5. Because this is without a doubt a delicious wine. John Duval Entity 2010. John Duval of, I would say, of John Duval fame, but he used to be the Penfolds winemaker, of course, and made Grange for a very long time. Pick up glass 5, give it a good swirl, and smell. Beautiful aromatics on the nose. Lovely dried herbal fruits, but dried fruits, prune characters. It's got olives. It's much more savoury notes on the nose. You've got structure, you've got balance. Interesting is here, there's no perception of alcohol at all. Have a taste. Softness, finesse, like you would expect of a wine of this age and of this vintage. Long on the palate. It's got that lovely textural character. Each little part of the wine has balance, and it makes you want to have another sip, pure and simple. That is balanced wine. I believe that the middle chocolate is matched with Shiraz is going to be a highlight for you, and there's a little hidden secret inside of here. You can't smell it, so don't bother. Stick it in get a good amount, stick it in your mouth. Someone will hit a big chunk of it very soon. Yell it out. Salt, there we go. You got a big chunk, whoever it was, right there. Once you've got that, you've got a big gooey mess in your mouth, have a sip from glass 5. It's fascinating because it lifts this salty element out of the Shiraz. Interesting is, the more Rhone-like, so the more, I would say, the cooler climate, Shiraz, think of Heathcote and all these areas, the more you see that real briny saltiness in the Shiraz, and the more that chocolate lifts it out. But even here, you get this lovely harmony and synergy between the two. They just match and they marry on your palate to the point where you get this lovely length and this beautiful finesse. Have another little bite of your chocolate. And pick up glass 6. And when you're ready, have a taste. It's always interesting to do this standing from where I'm standing, because you get a number of different facial reactions. Some people, it just makes you grimace. Some people shake their head. It gives you a reaction to the point where it's quite intense. In other people, it's softer and milder. But the reality is, in every one of you, there's a reaction. And it's never ever. It's always quick, get this out of my mouth, and then you go looking for water, you go looking for beer, something other than what you just tasted to get rid of that sensation on the palate. All right. A little highlight, huh? Sea salt chocolate and Shiraz. There you go. Let's put the wine back into your plastic cup. And now I need to show you what glass 6 was actually designed for, because so far you only notice a water glass. Not really fair. All right, last wine. What I'm going to get you to do is split it actually, no, you know what? We're going to do 3 glasses. We have the time. Let's have a look at glass 6, a glass 5, and glass 4. Evenly distribute it. The reason I wanted to do it in each 3 here is that if you think about the hallmarks of young Cabernet in this country, and the reality is we are much better at Shiraz, by and large, than what we are with Cabernet. Cabernet is a tough varietal in this country because of a ripeness. But when it's done well, it's done exceptionally well. But the hallmark of good young Cabernet is the tannic structure, so it's more about a palate sensation and a feel. And this is where often they're quite challenged. Yalumba the Menzies, 2013 is the vintage. Quite a softer vintage, much softer than what we saw in 2012. Give the wine a really good swirl in the glass, number 6 we start with. This is good textbook Coonawarra Cabernet. So cast your mind back to when you last had Coonawarra Cabernet and you'll discover all of these textbook aromas in here. Blackcurrant, blackberries. You've got that mint, so that lovely herbal mint components on the nose. That very typical cedary, wood, oak characters in there. As I say, for me, textbook Coonawarra Cabernet. Have a sip, think about tactile sensation, think about feel on the palate. Soft, finesse. I talked before about the grip of the tannins. Tannins grip here, they build, but they release, they become very soft on the palate. You think about aftertaste, and what you end up with is a beautiful long wine that's got that vibrancy and the freshness of young fruit, that middle part of the wine where it really fills out on the palate, and that beautiful finesse at the end, that length. Pick up glass 5. Have a smell. Very tight and closed on the nose, so it doesn't give you that varietal distinction that we saw in glass 6. Have a taste. I talked before about marked tannins. The grip, the feel, the graininess that you get on the palate here. The tannins grip, they build and they don't release. You still get fruit, no doubt, but it becomes much more single-dimensional in its structure, harder to define. Oak and the mineral and the earth components here become the backbone of what this glass offers you. Why is it that Cabernet and Shiraz work so well? Because they're intrinsically, of course, opposed, opposites. One plugs the whole of the other, pure and simple. So when we think about it from a glass perspective, how could it be that they could be in the same glass? They can't. I should point out to you, the only reason we know this, it's not because we've studied the grape variety and we say this grape looks good in this glass. It's all done through workshop processes. So in other words, same wine in many different glasses, and we sit down with winemakers, we sit down with wine writers, anybody who's experts and knowledgeable about the grapes, and we ask them to rate the glasses. We rank them negatively. In other words, get rid of the ones which don't perform. And it's fascinating, whenever we do this experience, when we look at Cabernet or when we look at Shiraz, the alternate glass never gets past bracket 1 or 2. Now, some people without a doubt know which glass is which. Maybe they have preferences, maybe visually yes, but the reality is most people we know don't know which glass of ours is which, because we get this question all the time, for sure. When some of the glasses look so similar sometimes, until you get to know them and they become one with you, then yes, it is challenging to know which glass is which, without a doubt. But you can't lie. In other words, the glass can't hide anything for you. It'll only present exactly what the glass is capable of presenting for you. A Pinot Noir glass is made for Pinot Noir and Nebbiolo. How do we know this? Because this is what the workshops told us. Pure and simple. When we put Cabernet in this glass, You see what happens yourself. Pick up the glass, number 4. Very green and varietal and stemmy here. So all the green notes, all, for me, what would typically I would classify as underripe style of fruit. Have a taste. Lots of intense acid on the palate, intense bitterness at the back of the wine, so you get the sour notes. Very bland and dry into the middle. Think about aftertaste, and it's all bitter components. It's all of the wrong elements of this wine, and it makes you want to have a glass of water. There you go, every time. All right, one last little comparison we have for you. Pick up the final chocolate, break the ear off. Dark 70% cacao. You got soft teeth, don't bite it off. Melt it up. Once you're ready, big chocolatey gooey mess in the mouth, have a sip from glass 6. Beautiful. You get lovely characters from that bitterness of the chocolate, and then you get the lovely harmony of the wine. Interesting in this country how often, I would say not here, we often finish the night on cheese, soft cheeses and red wine. Guys, this is like oil and water. They don't mix. They don't mix on your palate and they don't mix in your belly. They separate. Chocolate and red wine. If you want to finish the night on red wine, stick with something like chocolate. Much easier match than cheeses. You want to finish on cheese, then you need to look at Rieslings or Champagne, and or certainly some sweeter wines work very well. But red wine and cheese, very challenging. Have another little bite of your chocolate. And the one sip which I'm going to get you to have is from glass 4, your Pinot Noir glass. When you're ready, pick up your glass. I'm ready for the faces. Make them good. Yours is the best, I have to say. Fascinating. Yeah. All got to do with balance. Balance is linked to enjoyment, and this, folks, is what we pay for. Very simple. Last little part of the tasting which I will take you through before we let you go is just a bit of handling and care. Just so you know, all of our glasses are dishwasher safe, whether we talk about it in a home environment or whether we talk in a commercial environment. All of our glasses. The line we've used today is called Veritas. Veritas is a line which we produced 2 years ago. It's a line which we're very proud of because this is as close as we can get to hand making of glass, but executed by machine. So this is a machine-made glass, but feels like a handmade glass. Sold at a machine-made price. So, we have, in a commercial environment, by the way, if you're still polishing your glasses, you need to have a talk to your your machine supplier, because this is a thing of the past. If your machine is set up correctly, no polishing of glass. Where your glasses go in, they come out, leave them in the rack for 20 minutes, they're ready to go back onto the table, and that should be the only handling, which means you should be able to lose a person behind the bar washing, polishing of glasses. It will also save you a small fortune in breakages as well. For us, I'd rather you have a broad range of glasses and are keeping them and not breaking them, rather than just having 1 or 2 glasses because you can't afford the breakage level. This makes no sense at all to me. So think about it in this context. If you want to have a chat to me, I'm more than I can give you some advice. We've got no affiliations here, so it's unbiased and advice, but certainly advice which would no doubt help you. 2 last final things. The bag which was sitting on your seat is for the glasses. So the glasses sitting in front of you are a gift from me. Enjoy. I hope, obviously you all get 1 left shoe, so sorry, you need to buy the right shoe and make sure you have a pair, because you can't get caught with a good glass for yourself and not one for your partner, unless you bought your partner. Final thing I have for you is, if we do have a little offer for you, a special offer for the Gault&Millau people who've come here today. So if you want that, please come and see me. and I'll happily give that to you. Thanks so much.